And we're back, and we're joined by 18th Judicial District DA George Brauchler. How are you, sir?
Living the dream.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. All right. You ran for Attorney General last year.
I did. Thank you for bringing that up.
I didn't know if you recalled that or not.
Yeah, I do. In fact, the title that you ran underneath here doesn't say that, so you know how it turned out.
The 18th is a big judicial district. Yes, it's one of the biggest in the state, isn't it?
Huge, about the size of the state of Connecticut, 1 million plus Coloradans in it.
And it covers a lot of different ground, too, urban, rural,
Yep,
suburban, it's got it all?
Everything. We've got 40,000 acre ranches out in Lincoln County to all the urban issues that parts of Aurora give to us and everything in between.
All right. So last year, you gave what I thought was a fairly nuanced support to the idea of what they call red flag, a red flag bill. And really the name is Extreme Risk Protection Order, and it's a process to set this up. That bill failed.
It did.
And you took some heat. That bill is back. Oh, you took a little.
Quite a bit of heat.
Quite a bit? Is that the right word for it?
There's pain in this area still from that.
All right, so a bill has been reintroduced. It's making its way through the legislature. By any measure, worse than the bill from a civil liberties standpoint and from a Second Amendment standpoint, we believe, I think. You agree? I mean, you've come out against this one.
I have.
And there's good reason for it.
Great reason for it. It is remarkably different in a negative way with only one exception, and that exception is the built-in clause there regarding providing counsel to someone who might be the respondent for this. I think that's a step in the right direction, but that in and of itself cannot outweigh the other changes they've made.
All right, I'd like to get into some detail, especially the due process aspect of this particular bill. Let's step back and do a 50,000-foot view. This bill, the people who talk about these bills talk about mental health. And the idea is here that you're supposed to be able to address someone who's in crisis. This bill does nothing to address people who are in mental health crisis other than take their guns. I got that right?
That's accurate. The backdrop of this is the mental health piece. And I think everyone I know, you included, would say, if we had the ability to intervene in that nexus between dangerous mental health and any weapon, whether it's firearms, knives, a car, whatever, we'd say, of course, we want to do that. But this bill only sets up a mechanism where for sure we're going to get the guns away. And then there's the possibility that there may be some services provided that deal with the mental health, but no guarantee about it.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
Basically. So now the cops can come to your door if this is issued and take your guns, but it's not like a little team of social workers are going to come to your door if one of these things gets issued to give you some counseling.
No,
right?
If that happens, that's going to be driven by the law enforcement agency. And outside the metro area, none of them have the resources to bring those people along, so that's not going to happen.
No, absolutely not. All right, so let me get, here's one of our big gripes about this. Last year's bill, this year's bill, that this is about going in and taking the guns and then leaving the guy there with access to other things that could be used as a weapon. So you're not removing the person from the dangerous situation, you're removing some dangerous items from the person's house and then leaving a guy. Sometimes I think the people who draft these don't know any gunnies, right? Look, I'm a gun owner, but I'm not I'm not a gunny, right? Yeah. Gunny.
Yeah.
I know gunnies. I know you know gunnies.
Right, oh yeah.
You heard from them.
For sure.
The idea that you're going to go into a guy's house and get all of his guns is kind of laughable to me in many ways, because how do you know, right? I mean, you don't know about the guns maybe at the hunting cabin or the fishing cabin, maybe the guns hidden in the rafters of the garage, the second gun safe somewhere. I mean, there's kind of this assumption that, well, if we get one of these protection orders, we get a warrant, we'll go in, we'll take the guy's guns, we'll be on our way, and everything's going to be not fine, but that's the extent of it. And I just don't see that necessarily happening. I also see this potentially being pretty dangerous to the police in certain situations. So there's real problems to this idea of talking about mental health, but then only introducing a bill that deals with seizing guns.
I do think that the better approach for us, given that reality, and what we're really trying to tackle here, is to fix this 72-hour mental health hold law that we have it's broken. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. But this is the only vehicle that has been offered right now. And that includes Republicans and Democrats so far. Nobody has come up with something else. So this now becomes the one thing we have to focus on as a legislature to say, we're going to get something through. And if you listen to the narrative, all the narrative is about we're going to save lives. It doesn't matter how many, 1, a billion, it doesn't matter. They're convinced they're going to save lives because if they can get some guns away from people who might harm themselves, that'll make it all worth it. I'm not convinced, 1, that that's true, that it's going to be that effective, but 2, I'm also not convinced that that is the only reason why we pass laws. We could reduce the speed limit to 40 miles an hour everywhere and save a ton more lives than we'll ever save with this bill, but we're not going to do that either. So when you say this is a bill that is targeted towards the guns and not the mental health, I think that's provably true.
Wow. All right, let me tell you, so the bill is called Concerning Creation of an Extreme Risk Protection Order. In the very first paragraph, and I have the bill here, it says the petitioner must establish by a preponderance of the evidence that a person poses a significant risk. So wait a minute, which is it? Is this an extreme risk protection order bill, or is this a significant risk protection order bill, and what's the difference?
Yeah, now admittedly, this was a similar issue that existed in last year's bill, but last year's bill, in my opinion, was far more conservative, lowercase c, than this one is. And so these become bigger issues because you've now, and we'll talk about this, we've shifted the burden to the gun owner to try to get their rights back. So the definition of these terms matters. And what's interesting is neither one of them are defined, and we're sort of left to our own gut reaction to what extreme and significant is. And extreme creates a sense of urgency, or like it's huge, right? Like if
it's right now.
Well, right now. And if In-N-Out were to come and set up shop in Colorado Springs, and my gosh, they can't get here soon enough, and I eat 2 double animal style burgers, people would go, Brauchler, that's extreme, or that's significant. If I ate 5, that'd be extreme. So when we call it extreme, I think it's for effect, because if you said, hey, let's pass a significant risk protection order, it sounds a little lamer, right? It doesn't sound nearly as, we got to do this right now. So not defining it leaves a ton of discretion to a judge to decide, what does extreme mean to them? What does significant mean to them?
The significance, obviously, a lower standard than extreme, at least in plain language.
In the vocabulary, in the dictionary, it feels like it's less urgent than extreme. But again, undefined, it leaves it up to a judge to decide what's significant.
Okay, so there's a couple, you've also, in Complete Colorado, published an article, interviewed you about this bill, and there's some due process issues going on inside of this thing, and one of them is that the burden of proof to have your gun seized is lower than the burden of proof to get your guns back, and the burden is on you to prove that you should get them back rather than the state. That seems to be a little bit backwards from the normal way that our system is supposed to work.
It is, but let me clarify. The lower standard to take them away is only initially. So it's that first 14 days, which I think people ought to know. This bill, for whatever reason, they double the length of time that you have to wait to get into court to either address it at the preliminary level or even at the permanent level. So that's an inexplicable change to me. But the lower level takes place up front. So to get a preliminary protection order, you just have to have preponderance of the evidence, which is the lowest standard in all of civil law. They still have to get over the hurdle of clear and convincing to get a more permanent order.
Okay.
But the real rub for me is when they've said once that permanent order is imposed, and it's a 364-day order, if you want to come back and challenge that, you have a right to do it, but guess what you have to bring with you? You have to bring all the evidence and all the proof that you deserve to have your Second Amendment rights back. I don't know any other area of the law where we do that, where we say, hey, once the judicial process has happened against you, you're now stuck trying to prove that you should have these rights back. It should always be with the party infringing on your rights to prove that they have the ability and right to do that.
We talked about this while we were chatting before the show, but I mean, something's going to pass.
Without question.
Without question. It's going to pass with no Republican support, is what it looks like right now. And in fact, there's going to be some Democrats that vote against it. But you were saying that this will be the only one of these in the country that didn't have some kind of bipartisan buy-off on it.
Yeah,
right?
There's 13 states and the District of Columbia have some version of this bill, and that's the other misnomer, is everybody thinks red flag is the same as red flag is the same as red flag. Yeah. It's not. They're different colors of red. But in this particular case, we are poised to become the first state in the country to pass this on a party line vote. And what you can say about the bipartisan part is we're going to have bipartisan opposition to this bill, but it's only going to pass with one party vote. I don't think that's good for Colorado. Even if you like this concept and you think there's a workable way that will protect due process and the community, and I believe that, this ain't it.
We also, Sheriff Steve Reams up in Weld County, and it looks like Weld County, I don't know if it's going to happen, might take up the idea of becoming a sanctuary Second Amendment sanctuary county. Fremont County did
Right.
this. I believe Montezuma County. Look, these are small counties.
Yeah.
Weld's
big.
Weld's a big, significant county.
They're big.
And one of the interesting things that the sheriff said is that the police, they don't do no-knock raids at the sheriff's office, but other agencies do, that the police have to go in and serve these warrants without actually knowing the details behind it, so they don't actually know what they're stepping into. Is that a problem?
It's a huge problem. It's another one of the flaws in this bill that even existed in last year's. But again, with the different times and due process issues, it's even worse. I don't think there ought to be a private right of action here, right? Like, I want mom and dad and brother and sister and spouses to be involved in this process, but I don't want them to be able to go to court without law enforcement for that exact reason. So if they can't go get an order, judge calls up the sheriff and says, good luck.
All right.
That's not workable.
Thanks, George. We're out of time.
Love to be here.
And thanks for
Thank
your
you.
opposition to the bill, and I guess we'll see you at the legislature.
For sure. Thanks,
All
man.
right. Yeah. Check independenceinstitute.org, and we'll see you next week.